The Fire Year in Review studies the previous year's fire activity and firefighting tactics to help us predict the coming year's fire intensity and to implement the most effective plans while keeping safety at the forefront of our minds. Let's dive in to the 2025 Fire Year in Review. Safety should always be paramount to firefighters. And this year, we sat down with fire leaders of multiple agencies for their thoughts on safety. After speaking with all of them, we can definitively say that they all share a common value. Your safety is their highest priority. In the next segment, you'll hear from leadership discussing how we can all take action to help ensure not just our own safety, but also the safety of our brothers and sisters on the fire line.
For any transition day being on the line, I think if you've been in fire for any amount of time, I think we're more acutely aware of what's going on, and that could be weather, that could be an incoming team, but like during transitions, pretty critical timing. And so this year, 2026, what would you say about our current transition going into the 2026 fire season?
Yeah, for me, transition was everything you just shared, right? But it was also excitement, right? I mean, man, all the unknowns perhaps, or what you think you might encounter and what you won't. And I think, from a safety perspective, is probably like you, as I grew up through the crew and became a crew supervisor, I would start thinking more about those safety concerns. What kind of topography are we going to be working? Are we working day shifts? Are we working night shifts? All of those things. And we're in that time of year again, and it is exciting, right? I remember, I don't get out on the crew anymore. That transition time was a period, at least for me, for self-reflection, right? Going into another year. And all the anticipation of what lies ahead, and we're anticipating a really active season. So that's in mind, and what comes with that, right? And what are those safety concerns that come with that? So I think, you don't have to be a supervisor to be thinking about that. That should be every firefighter. It should be on everybody's mind.
I'm very curious about your experience with safety during your career. I think it's changed since my career as well. Where have we been? Where are we now? And where are we going?
I would say this. I think our tolerance for risk was far greater than it should have been. I still go out in the line and watch, and observe. Far smarter, far more cognizant. We didn't have any kind of turn down policy. If you didn't take the assignment, you'd be called names, right? Sure. And God forbid that happen. And we did a lot of, quite frankly, stupid things that could have got people hurt or even killed. And I think the firefighter and the firefighter supervisors today are far better educated. They know, when it's time to decline an assignment, just far better prepared. And it's good to see, because again, I think the emphasis on safety needs to be what it is today. Take that serious. It's important, not only to yourself and your health, but your family. They want you back, and they want you back whole. Some things are unpreventable. It's just the nature of this business. It's a hazardous job, and sometimes things happen no matter how prepared or how safety cognizant you are. Things happen, But for those things that you do have control, having a safety mindset's critical, and it will be this year with all the activity we're expecting.
Everyone taking RT-130 this spring knows the significance and the importance of a transition day on a fire assignment. What is the important message that you would like to convey to them during this time?
I think transitions, we kind of get into a cycle and a comfort level of, it's just another thing, but it really is pretty significant. And you've got one group of people heading out that's probably pretty tapped, and they're ready to be done. And then you've got a group coming in that's ready to go, hit the ground, we got this. And it's really important to take the time to make sure there's the positive communication about really what are we setting the stage for? What are you walking into? There's no dumb question. Like, people always say that there's no dumb question, but sometimes it can be uncomfortable to put yourself out there like, I don't know this, or maybe I'm challenging something that is a norm and is an awkward space to be in. But that's the environment we're trying to create in fire, is that we have everybody within our system is a leader and has a role to raise questions and to call out gaps or flaws that they see that are potential in the system. And I think folks should have that comfort stepping into that space and know that they're supported, and that's exactly what we want that workforce to do.
So I love that you were talking about how everyone within their sphere of influence is a leader, like regardless of where you're at. What would you have people focus on for this fire season 2026?
I would say, it's really critical for us to just go back to the fundamentals of the system that we've built. But it's easy to get distracted. There's a lot of complexities right now in the system and a lot of change, and a lot of the complexities are very personally impactful to people, and I recognize that. So I would say the self-care and self-awareness of just where folks are mentally and physically to be able to be engaged and be supportive. The safety and well-being of our folks is by far my highest priority, and I think most folks' highest priority, and it's not to be sacrificed for anything that we have to do on the ground.
From a safety perspective, what would you tell people that they need to be engaged, focused on in 2026?
I thought about that a lot and what we could do this year, and there's three things that come to mind. One of those obviously is communication is a big part, and being safe out there, communication is paramount. Was the message delivered? Was the message received? And most importantly, was that message understood? And for that two-way communication to take place, that requires folks to make sure and ensure that that did happen. Refocusing on situational awareness for this year is extremely important. We have a lot of heavy fuel loads out there. We are facing what we've seen already this year with the weather. And some of the fire conditions has shown rapid escalation in fire behavior, rapid fire growth, and so being very aware of the situation is important for all of the firefighters. We're seeing a lot longer fire seasons. We're seeing a lot longer duration of folks having to work, long seasons. We're seeing fires that go on for an extended period of time, but you can't do a good job out there in the field if you're not taking care of yourself personally. So I think that's something that needs to be right at the forefront. So, I mentioned those three items of communication, situational awareness, and also just physical fitness and mental well-being. But I think it's also important that we all recognize that, we can't do this job unless we do it together. There's ways we can do that. I kind of use a motto of the 3 Bs, and I used to tell folks that I led in the fire service is like, hey, make sure you brief before you begin. And in that briefing, you want to make sure that you cover identify the hazards, make sure you're mitigating the risks out there.
The National Interagency Fire Center, or NIFC, in Boise, Idaho, is the nation's headquarters for wildland fire. NIFC is home to interagency leaders who work together to provide firefighters with the training, equipment, and resources they need to continue their critical mission of protecting lives and property. Housed within NIFC is the National Interagency Coordination Center, or NIC. The NIC coordinates with dispatch centers across the nation to help ensure the right resources get to the incidents where they're needed most. In addition to nationwide resource coordination, the NIC also provides valuable intelligence to firefighters. Every year, the NIC gathers and compiles wide-ranging information to produce the Wildland Fire Summary and Statistics Annual Report. The annual report is a detailed summary of data and statistics from the previous fire year. The intent is to help firefighters and fire managers recognize recurring patterns, make more accurate predictions, and ultimately make better and safer decisions when managing and suppressing wildfires. Let's take a look at the 2025 Annual Report. Overall, 2025 was a relatively slow fire year. There were more total wildfires than usual, but proportionally few large fires. In 2025, there were 77,850 reported wildfires that burned about 5.1 million acres, compared to about 68,000 fires that burned more than 8.9 million acres in 2024. The national preparedness level never reached PL5. But although 2025 was a fairly mild fire year for the nation as a whole, Southern California experienced extreme fires in January that killed at least 30 people and destroyed more than 16,000 structures. Firefighters from Canada mobilized to assist in fighting the devastating Palisades and Eaton fires. The United States returned the favor in June and July, when 20 crews and 154 overhead personnel mobilized to Canada to support firefighting efforts in Alberta and Saskatchewan. For an insider's perspective of the annual report, we sat down with Scott Mayer, the acting National Intelligence Coordinator for the NIC. All right, so we're here with Scott Mayer of the National Interagency Coordination Center, and we're just going to talk about this year's annual report. So first of all, Scott, thanks for being here with us.
Absolutely.
So I noticed this year there were 78,000 wildfires, and that sounds like a lot. So is it? Can you put that into perspective for us?
Yeah, 78,000 wildfires sounds like a pretty big number just off the cuff. I think it's always kind of important to frame that with a little bit of context, though. And while that is a high number, that's about 18,000 fires off of the high mark, around 96,000 fires set back in 2006. So not a record-setting year by any means. Actually, we didn't set any records, which is a good thing.
One of the fundamental functions of the NIC is to mobilize resources where they're needed. So how did last year's resource mobilization compare to previous years?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's certainly a focal point of what the NIC does in a lot of ways. I think we saw increased efficiency of mobilization, and I would attribute that to just a forward-thinking staff that has really built relationships with the different geographic areas, the better communication and coordination, foresight of where things need to be. Another thing that probably contributed to that was right-sized ordering. We didn't see just blocks of orders kind of coming up almost like time work, just every day for X amount of this resource and that resource. Right-sized ordering was less bog on the system and definitely increased that efficiency.
I know UAS was used a lot more last year, as well as IAA. Can you just tell us about that? Elaborate on how they're being used and how much more they're being used?
Yeah, both these programs have really just grown and improved, and they're using technology, and the demand is what's driving that. So the IAA, Incident Awareness and Assessment, those are, a pilot is there and an interpreter is on board to look at that footage and get that relayed back to the ground as quick as possible, uploaded so people can access it. But those guys are flying at night at high altitudes, coordinating with FAA. So not the same kind of risk as, for example, a helicopter on the fire line that's as many people. So to get that really good information and intel from those folks is imperative. UAS, unmanned aerial, that demand has also increased in their ability with improved sensors, technology, the endurance of the aircraft to be able to stay in the air longer without having to come back and charge batteries or swap out equipment has definitely helped in that world as well. So they're being used heavily for mapping and intelligence, but also for ignition operations. Being able to go do ignition operations without people putting up on the side of a hill, that's a big thing, and they're getting better and better each time. These programs are only going to grow, and the demand is increasing, and we can see why.
All right, Scott, so lastly, what have you seen and what do you think will happen with the transition into the U.S. Wildland Fire Service?
I think people are excited. People don't know what's necessarily coming, but what I would say a good takeaway and what's very important, and I would also link this back into just how fire is in general, but keeping a positive attitude and saying, boy, this isn't quite working, or this is working. Well, let's keep what's working, and let's pivot and find a way to make what isn't working better. So I think this is just another example of the wildland fire community. Its resiliency, its positivity, and a hardworking mentality. I look forward to any changes that come and embracing those, and just being able to contribute. And I think if we all keep that mindset of what can I do today to help the wildland fire community and the values and communities and things that we protect by doing that, I think we'll all come out good in this coming season.
Another valuable resource comes from the Wildland Fire Lessons Learned Center. The Lessons Learned Center, or LLC, produces a variety of research and reports to help responders keep themselves and others safe. One of those products is the Annual Incident Review Summary, which details injuries and other incidents from the previous fire year, including fatalities, entrapments, tree strikes, and vehicle accidents. For some expert insight, we spoke with Travis Touche, the director of the Lessons Learned Center. All right, so we're here with Travis Touche. He's the director of the Lessons Learned Center, so thank you for being with us, Travis.
Absolutely.
So let's just get right into it. So last year, I noticed there were 13 fatalities and 26 tree strikes. How typical would you say these numbers are?
Unfortunately, these numbers are pretty consistent for what we've seen in the last 10 years, but I think it's important to recognize that they're not just numbers, there are people involved behind these. When it comes to tree strikes, though, that's one thing that remains persistent in our business. But I think it's important to recognize that something we can do is just keep working on our situational awareness, following our risk management principles, and continuing to learn as a fire community. Then these numbers can change. They don't have to be inevitable.
So speaking of tree strikes, from day one as firefighters, from our very first season, it's drilled into us that felling trees is one of the most dangerous things you do. But one thing that caught my eye in this year's report was that of those 26 tree strikes, the majority happened when people were not actively felling. So what are some things that firefighters should take into consideration when they're working in snag patches or burned areas?
Yeah, there's a lot to consider with that. It's important to remember that when we have a lot of these tree strikes, that felling is not always involved. Of course, if you're on a steep slope, if you have winds coming up, that kind of thing, those are things that definitely to take into consideration. But I think really what we can do is concentrate on our situational awareness, pay attention to our risk management skills, and really limit our exposure when needed out there.
Okay, and lastly, what LLC message do you think is most critical for this year's RT130 audience?
Yeah, I think we need to continue to just work on being great students of fire, from the beginning firefighter all the way up to the old dogs that have been around and been exposed a lot. And it's just so important to share those experiences so we continue to learn as an organization. At the Lessons Learned Center, we have the RLSs, the rapid lesson sharing. We're very thankful that people have the courage to share their experiences so others can learn from them. Or when you're out in the field and talking next to that engine or in that dispatch center, and just really continuing to help each other learn from past experiences.
You can learn more at lessons.wildfire.gov.
6 Minutes for Safety is about quick, focused conversations that help firefighters recognize hazards and manage risk. We spoke with Brennan Henkla about how it's used and why it matters.
Right now I'm in fire prevention. Before that I would spend some time on engines. Been working with 6 Minutes for Safety for about 2 years now, just as a committee member.
What is 6 minutes?
Basically to get folks talking and get discussion points out there, and realizing the different hazards and thinking about risk management and all those sorts of things. There's even a way that you could submit your own 6 minutes for safety if there's something that you feel like we're lacking or you want to bring light to. We call it by the firefighter for the firefighter, and you can get in there and it's got a template. You can submit a topic, give us everything you got about it, and we'll review it, and maybe it'll be tossed into that.
Tell us a little bit about the utility of 6 minutes.
Yeah, 6 minutes for safety is something that you could use every single day. You can go onto the website and kind of browse through the different topics, and they're broken up into categories, and it can be applicable to really anybody, from the top all the way down to the newest firefighter. It's going to be kind of your comfort thing. I would say you kind of go back to it's something you've always done, something you continue to do, and it's just kind of keeping your head back in the basics. Everything's going on, transition and whatever it is, but 6 minutes is something that you can just kind of get yourself back to ground level and back to the basics of what we do.
This is Jim Wallman, meteorologist at the National Interagency Coordination Center Predictive Services Unit. Here is a spring fire outlook for the U.S. and a brief look ahead to what the peak of the Western fire year may look like. La Nina has been present this winter but is rapidly weakening. Neutral conditions are expected this spring, with an increasing chance of El Nino developing sometime over the summer into the fall. The Climate Prediction Center forecast for the next 3 months forecasts above normal temperatures likely across the southern half of the country, with below normal precipitation in the southwest quarter of the country. Above normal precipitation is most likely in the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley. For Alaska, normal springtime conditions are likely for most of the state, with warm and wet conditions slightly favored for the northwest, and cool and dry conditions favored for the southeast. For April, most of the country will have normal potential, except for the southeast Atlantic coast and Florida, which will remain in above normal potential. In May, above normal potential will continue in South Georgia and Florida until the rainy season begins in June and July. Looking ahead to the summer and potential western fire season concerns, snowpack is well below normal across most of the west. While some improvement is expected through March, the deficit for most locations is too great to overcome. Also, while portions of the Northern Rockies and Sierra are closer to normal, this is deceiving when looking at the individual stations on the right. Snowpack is mainly at the highest elevations and very low at the mid elevations. The Climate Prediction Center outlook for late spring and early summer in the west is not favorable. A very warm late spring into early summer is likely, along with drier than normal conditions for most of the west. The wet conditions forecast in Arizona is of low confidence and focused toward the start of the monsoon season in July. If this forecast is correct, a very busy and long western peak fire season is likely. Keep in mind these are generalized conditions expected across the country for the next few months. Conditions can change rapidly, and forecasts will change accordingly as we move through the spring and summer. For the most up-to-date outlooks and concerns for your geographic area, please contact your Geographic Area Predictive Services Unit.
I think for those that are brand new, to those that have got a lot of time on them is, think about all the things that are coming in the coming months. And there'll be a lot of fun, firefighting and being with fellow firefighters there's no better fun. Right. But it is hard work and it's very hazardous work. And to remember your families and that they're not out there having the fun with you. And when you do return, to get some time off, spend that quality time with them. The next assignment's coming. Don't wait on the curb for the thing. It's coming. But really, spend some quality time with your family. Get your head right. We're seeing, throughout the fire service now, a lot more emphasis on mental health and wellness, and it's the real deal.
While I think we have a very resilient workforce that is the most highly effective group of individuals that are used to constantly changing environments and being adaptable and taking new information maybe multiple times a day and coming up with a different course of actions. Our folks are really strong at that. And yet it's still easy to be distracted by some of those external factors, like all of the complexities that we're aware of. And a lot of those are outside the control of folks. And so I would just encourage people to acknowledge that and really try to purposefully focus on the task and the mission that they're at hand and not try to be distracted by, what's taking place in the broader environment within fire. And that's a huge challenge. It's asking people to do a lot.
I shared with folks a lot of times that, don't let the ghosts of those you lead cry out for your lack of leadership. And part of that leadership is being prepared, making sure that you have folks aware of what they could face out there, making sure that you brief out on those identified hazards and that you're mitigating those risks.